I learned one thing the hard way. Never underestimate a woman with a clipboard and a smile, because smiles are how people hide teeth. Yeah, that happened to me. My name's Zach, this is my land, and for a while it looked like the neighbors were trying to steal it with glossy envelopes and charm. Let me back up a sec, you'll want to hear how a patch of grass turned into a courtroom drama. And how my daughter's TikTok video made a whole town rethink what community actually means. It started with an envelope, one of those fancy gold-trimmed deals that should have meant a wedding invite, but instead said Willow Grove Hills Homeowners Association across the flap. Tree logo, neat serif font, the whole suburban circus. My daughter Sarah found it stuck on the front gate while feeding the goats, all bright morning and oblivious chickens, and I remember thinking, someone's polite. Then I read the inside and realized polite had teeth, you know what I mean? Karen Hendricks showed up a few days later, tall, overgroomed, clipboard like armor, standing in my pasture like she belonged at a garden club meeting, not in cow dung. I was wiping grease off my hands from tuning the diesel generator, leaning on the gate, and she said, "Mr. Hanley, is it?" Like she already owned the answer, which is always a red flag. Her voice had that syrupy edge, polite but stretched thin over condescension. "We'd like to integrate your property into Willow Grove. It's all about community standards and stewardship." Stewardship, I thought. This land's been in my family since before color TV. I'm not handing over a sliver of it to a clipboard brigade. "Ma'am," I said, "this is zoned agricultural, not a model home." Her smile flickered for half a second, like a mask that almost fails. Then she tacked it back on and said, "Boundaries can be flexible. We've had success assimilating." Assimilating? Nice word for moving lines and making new rules. I figured that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, a certified envelope from the county sat on the porch. Department of Environmental Oversight, preliminary notice of inspection, alleged wastewater runoff, improperly stored pesticides, the structural integrity of my sheds under scrutiny. I scanned it, sent it to Nate, my land attorney, and he laughed until he stopped laughing. "They're fishing, Zach," he said flat. "Someone's trying to trigger a code cascade." "Let me guess, the HOA you told me about." Bingo. We drafted our response, denied consent to random inspections, cited zoning laws, requested the origin of complaints, but formal letters don't stop people who have time on their hands and power in their pockets. The very next morning I spotted 2 men across the west field, one with a zoom lens the size of a small child, the other pretending not to fly a drone. No badges, no permits, just matching polos and smug faces. I drove the Polaris up on them and asked what the hell they were doing. Contracted environmental assessors. They mumbled, no IDs, so I told them to pack it up before I called the sheriff. They left, but not before snapping a few pictures. By the end of that week, a second county letter arrived. This one recommending suspension of agricultural activity until a review could be completed. Now they were playing hardball. The complaints came like a script. Noise reports for machinery that never ran past dusk, odor complaints from a neighbor 1,000 yards away, claims that my haying schedule somehow violated someone else's peace. It would be funny if it wasn't terrifying. Then a dead chicken appeared stuffed in my mailbox, and all humor drained away. I stopped reacting and started preparing. I installed motion-activated trail cams, posted private land, no trespassing, in English and Spanish, kept the feedlot locked. Still, the ghost complaints kept coming, stacked with signatures and little notarized stamps that looked official enough to scare a county clerk. One night I found a tractor parked 5 feet from where I usually left it, the brake line slashed clean. No chew marks, nothing accidental, deliberate. I didn't call the local sheriff. Turns out 2 deputies owned property in Willow Grove and played pickleball with Karen. Small town favors, small town bias. So I called my cousin Rob, retired Army engineer and drone obsessive, who shows up with gear that could make NASA jealous. Within 72 hours we had footage, a gray pickup, lights off, trailing the eastern irrigation canal. 2 people got out, walked the fence line, took photos, then drove off down the north access road that leads straight to Willow Grove. Rob ran the plates through channels, registered to a subcontractor for the urban ecological remediation firm that filed the original complaint. Of course, the harassment escalated. Kids at Sarah's school started calling her livestock girl. Someone dropped a bag labeled contaminated soil in her locker, and one night both tires on her bicycle were slashed clean. On the seat was a note, "Maybe Daddy should plant silence next year." Let me tell you, that one doesn't make you angry so much as very, very practical. I dug out the old deeds, grandfather's ink boundary trees, hand-sketched plats, and overlaid them with county maps. What I found made my stomach drop. 5 homes built along the back end of Willow Grove sat right along the fence line, but the fence wasn't where it should have been. It sat 30 yards inside what my grandfather's map called mine. Either a sloppy survey, or someone nudged the map and hoped nobody noticed. We took photos, marked GPS points, scanned deed images. I brought in a private surveyor from Savannah. No local ties, no HOA friendships. He spent 3 days plotting every inch, dropping GPS markers, and confirmed it. Just under an acre of my land had been illegally built on. Then he found the conduit, an underground electric line that cut diagonally under my hayfield. No easement on record, nothing. My dirt powering somebody else's toaster, unpaid and unauthorized. I didn't blare sirens. I built a record. Thermal scans at night, timestamps, license plates, witness statements. Nate started drafting letters, formal, precise, nasty enough for lawyers, sent certified to Karen, to the HOA board, to the utility, and to the county engineer. 7 days to respond. None did. Then Nate called early one morning with a voice that sounded like he'd swallowed a tax audit. The complaint that hit the county, was filed jointly by Willow Grove Hills and a shell landscaping company I'd never heard of, a P.O. box for an address, no web footprint. The report accused me of damaging biodiversity, creating toxic runoff, and, in my favorite, visual pollution inconsistent with community values. Visual pollution, because apparently my cows offended someone's sense of curb appeal. That one landed in the file and sat there like a bad joke with a notary stamp. That's when I brought in Daryl, an old Marshal Service contact now with the Department of Interior, and he didn't even wait for me to finish. "Get Claudia Vance on this," he said. Claudia's a federal land use investigator and a former prosecutor who eats forged plats for breakfast. She arrived in my kitchen with dust on her boots and a look like someone who'd smelled rotten paperwork before. Within an hour, she was flipping through documents and pointing at a notary stamp that was expired. A signature where my father's name was misspelled, Raymond Henley with an E, classic forgery slip. That was the break we needed. Nate filed counterclaims, fraud, forgery, attempted land seizure, theft of services, and Claudia bundled up a notarized report that ripped the HOA's annexation theory to pieces. The feds started pulling grant applications, bank transfers, contractor invoices, and with each layer they peeled back, the rot smelled worse. The electric conduit had been put in as part of an infrastructure improvement that got federal green energy money, claims that listed the cable path as existing municipal easement, an outright lie. One county engineer who'd signed off on permits? Brother-in-law to the contractor who filed the first complaint. Collusion, top to bottom. We kept recording. Rob flew the drone daily. Sarah, who had been quiet and fierce all at once, stitched together camera clips, town hall meeting footage where Karen lied with a smile, and uploaded a short documentary to TikTok called How My Dad's Farm Almost Got Stolen by HOA Mafia. It went viral, national attention, people from libertarian off-grids to suburban moms piling in with rage and empathy. Views turned into pressure, unmarked federal cars showed up, subpoenas hit Karen's house, the HOA office, the contractor's warehouse, the planning office. They took boxes and servers and envelopes. We watched the panning shots on the news, like a movie we didn't audition for. The courtroom was where the theater turned serious. Claudia read counts in a voice that made the room sit up. Fraudulent grant applications, forged zoning documents, collusion to seize property. The judge wanted verified records, not fantasy maps. Karen didn't show her face for long. Her mugshot later did the rest of the talking. No power suits, no glossy smiles, just an orange jumpsuit and a messy bun. The indictment listed a dozen federal charges: fraud, forgery, conspiracy to defraud the government, unlawful land seizure, unauthorized development. The HOA dissolved like a bad rumor. Judge Harwell signed an injunction. No further construction, no tampering with utilities, and the court authorized measures to secure my land. Nate counseled caution, but sometimes law needs muscle. So on a windy Wednesday, with cameras rolling and Rob flying high, we excavated the main power line that ran under my hayfield, exposed it, clipped it clean, and watched 5 houses go dark. I left a note on the gate. You've been disconnected. Contact your HOA. People called names, threatened suits. One family cried about medical machines. I handed over a generator and told them to bill Karen. Here's the twist. This story isn't just about a stubborn old farmer. It's about ordinary people becoming unlikely defenders. Sarah walked into an auction room with a cashier's check and bought the last of the encroaching houses, the one on the ridge, without telling me. Later she said, "If they were going to steal our land, I'm buying back what they built and turning it into something good." She turned that house into a rescue shelter, kennels, a small clinic. Volunteers came from 3 counties, local vets donated time, and that place went from stolen lot to a haven in 6 weeks. We used settlements and some of the recovered funds to build cabins by the stream, reclaimed wood, solar panels, an agritourism program we called Liberty Pastures. No gates, no HOA rules. City folks came to milk goats, sleep under a sky that actually belonged to them, and learn how quiet sounds when it's earned. State lawmakers passed tighter rules on digital plat verification and independent audits. Maybe the system learned something. Karen got time, her contractor got a sentence, engineers took plea deals, the HOA name became toxic. Some nights I sit on the porch with Sarah, a mason jar of sweet tea in hand, the pasture breathing under a low sun, and I look at the barn door with that faint red smear where someone once spray-painted community terrorist. I never scrubbed it off, left it like a bookmark, a reminder that ugliness swings hard, but it doesn't always win. Victory doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's slow, steady, the sound of a gate closing on a good morning. So here's what I want to leave you with. When community standards arrive with glossy envelopes and polite smiles, who do you trust? The neighbor with the clipboard or the farmer with grease on his hands? Drop a comment. Tell me if you'd have done the same. Share a time you stood up for something that mattered. What's justice when the law meets greed? And when does a person need gumption and a generator? Share your take. I'd love to hear it.